Never believe that that system of adjudication is for you or me. It's for wealthy people and foolish people and over-optimistic people. And I think the European system is somewhat better, but both of them are dominated by professional lawyers who are making lots of money, doing just fine with this gold-plated system that never starts out by saying, all right, what would be a maximum penalty that we would impose on this person for being unreasonable about playing his music too loud?
Nicholas, that was fascinating. I never even noticed there was a difference between judiciary systems in different countries. I think most people's experience of what a judge does or how courtroom works is sort of what they see on television. You know, first time you saw Matlock or first time you saw Rumpole in the UK, and maybe, if you saw a brief interaction with a European film. But I did notice the difference. Just to recap, and apart maybe from when there's some brave Italian magistrate investigating the mafia, but other than that, I hadn't any concept of it. Just to recap briefly, again, what's the difference between the US, England on one side and European on the other?
The European system, which in this particular case I'm saying is good, and the British system is bad, the European system takes the view that the judge is there to find the truth, the advocates are there to defend the rights of the parties, and that's the best way to run a court case. The British system in the British system, the judge is much more hands-off. The two sides of the case more or less run the case. So the idea is, the implication is that the truth emerges from competition between two sides. And I think we're at a time in our culture where we're seeing how wrong that is. And we're seeing that we need much more than just two partisan interests to land us at the truth. And in the British system, it's more expensive. It's, I think, much less efficient, not just because it costs more, but it takes longer. And the advocates, because they run it to maximize their own professional, financial interests and the interest of the party they represent, insofar as that simply places burdens on the other side, even though particular burdens of extremely unlikely possibilities should not be pursued. But they are, because you're just trying to fight as hard as you can on every point.
How would two adjacent countries diverge so much in the way they would run something as fundamental as court case? What is it about France and what about England? Obviously, the history is no doubt, you would fill a library on jurisprudence and where it came from. But 30 seconds or a minute. Why is England different?
It's funny, isn't it? It's funny because look at the difference between the metric system and the imperial system of measurement. So I can't give you a really good answer exactly why, but the European system is highly influenced by Roman law, then the Catholic, the structure of the papacy, which was invested in Roman law and canon law, and then the Code Napoleon, in which, as Napoleon took over, he marched his legal system into wherever he went in Europe. This is a top-down system. And intriguingly, in Britain, way back to about the 12th century, you have the king is responsible. The king will travel around the country and he will try to settle local disputes, and he will often put someone in charge of doing that. And the thinking that emerged was that the judge's role, the judge was not declaring the law, the judge was discovering the law, and the law resided in the customs of the people. And so now I actually like that idea. So the doctrine of law, I think the British one is in many ways superior, although you obviously have to have the ability for Parliament to pass top-down law. But as far as legal procedure is concerned, we've talked in our videos about a tennis game, and I've likened this to a tennis game or a football game in which the umpire is, the two captains make the calls, and then if they can't agree and they have a big fight, then we bring a person out, and it all takes 5 minutes or 15 minutes to sort the problem out. You don't have those sort of problems in professional sport because we know that's a mad way to do things, but that's how we do it in legal procedure in the UK and in English-speaking countries generally.
But it's gotten on fine. Like we haven't degenerated into legal chaos up until now.
Yeah.
It worked in some way. And similarly, it works fine in France. But I presume it has its downsides. So what's different now?
I don't know what's different now. I actually much more radical. I have a much more dark and radical view, which is roughly along the lines that we don't have a legal system. What I mean by that is that if you are a normal tax-paying member of the public, you have to more or less bet your life savings if you want to have a serious court case with someone. That's bad news if you want to sue a big corporation or a wealthy person. So I don't, I think I should be able to take my neighbor to get an imposed resolution from the legal system if I think he's playing his music too loud or vice versa. Well, that's $10,000 down just to start, and it could go to 20, 30. And all we want is an independent person, spend a bit of time, half a day if necessary, that's quite a lot of time, and just sort it out. And then if you think of the years that go by, divorce courts, whenever normies run into the legal system, it's barely a legal system. Now, in fact, it leaves a trace of rules and precedents, and that gives you a good chance of who's going to win a case. But never believe that system of adjudication is for you or me. It's for wealthy people and foolish people and over-optimistic people. And I think the European system is somewhat better, but both of them are dominated by professional lawyers who are making lots of money, doing just fine with this gold-plated system that never starts out by saying, all right, what would be a maximum penalty that we would impose on this person for being unreasonable about playing his music too loud? $5,000. All right, we should be trying to solve this dispute by spending less than $1,000 worth of administrative burden. No legal system that I know of works like that because they're all run by lawyers.
It's a bit like, invading Russia. Even if right is on your side, at some point, quantity has its own quality, and eventually, when you're eating horses, it doesn't really matter who was right in the first place.
Exactly. I once took someone who was working for my business to the small claims court. She was in another state. This cost about $12,000 to get her to mediation. And then I realized, firstly, I was sort of scared that she might turn violent or something if I tried to garnish or tried to resume her house, and I didn't like the idea of doing that. But the other problem was that we could get an order to do that, and then it wasn't enforceable because it was just thousands and thousands and thousands more dollars to lawyers once you'd got the determination to actually enforce it. Just completely ramshackle, a scandalously ramshackle system. This is small claims court, and Australia's as well run as most countries. So it's a pretty bad system. I don't know whether I answered
The
your
thing
question there, but
No, we certainly raised some other questions, and maybe we'll have another set of videos of the precise details of that court case, which sounds intriguing. And I, I've noted that for future reference.
right.
I mean, one thing I know in some European countries, and we'll get to what might be the right answer. For example, speeding fines are scaled on your ability
Yeah.
to pay, so
Yeah.
it's possible to be fined 100,000
Yeah.
Swiss francs
That's right.
for
Yeah.
speeding, for example,
Yeah.
which is, there's nothing like a sense that your invincibility is being removed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And,
well,
and that's obviously just up to the legislation of the legislators and not to do with legal procedure. But I think it's a good thing. I think that it's a good idea to, if you're going to find people, to make it a share of their income or wealth rather than just a flat amount.
Now, similar to reforming anything big like education, if you try to reform examinations, everybody thinks we need reform, but nobody wants their child to be the first
Yep.
year
Yep.
of the new
Yep.
examination.
Yep.
How it's impossible to say how do we fix this or what needs to be fixed. I know in terms of what is a quick solution. How do we start thinking about a new type of legal system apart from let's do it like they do it in Europe?
Yeah. Well,
where do you start with a legal system where you have your vested interest in all that?
Well, people who are watching this video may think that I've paid you to ask that question, because the answer to your question is watch my videos, watch till the end.
Yeah.
But you will get it, perhaps from the first video, people will already have got the sense that we can handle a lot more of this ourselves. So a jury is a sample public. And it turns out, and this is how court cases were solved in ancient Athens, with a random selection of people. Now, it was a bizarre system because they had, I think Socrates was charged in front of 1,500 jurors. Well, I'm not suggesting that. But I mean, one interesting thing about our legal system is, unlike our political system, it does make this room for ordinary people. It's an important part of the process. I would argue that we need to build mechanisms in which ordinary people become a little more expert, not so much by not going off and doing further education classes, but by various mechanisms that we'll talk about in later videos. But one of the things you can do is let's say you've got a body of 50 ordinary people, as they do in East Belgium, and this is a political body. It's a body chosen at random from the population that talks about political things. You can ask those people to identify those among them who they admire the most. You can then, and so you can kind of promote those people and say, well, those are people who are trusted by their peers. Now, you don't want to say we're now going to make them the Inspector General of the legal system for the rest of their lives, but they can spend a year or more in a somewhat more senior position as a representative of ordinary people who are supposed to be the beneficiaries of a legal system, but are not. So that's a little bit of a sketch for the sorts of ways that I think we could reform these things. And it's very different to the way most people are talking, because most people are talking, oh, well, you need a small claims court. Then what tends to happen is that you design the small claims court to keep lawyers out of it. Then lawyers come in and start saying, well, you can't leave us out of it because I'm now taking you to the Supreme Court because you're acting beyond power, and the system escalates. If you try to build the system as if it's doing two things that matter: providing services to litigants and providing that shared center, providing an independent source of arbitration. That's actually what we want. We don't want gold-plated justice. We want the best that somebody decent can do. And that needn't cost the earth. It's just the way we've set it up in most countries. It does cost the earth.
So finally, for people who might be watching this video and a bit like me, realized for the first time that their legal system, like they know it doesn't work, but they haven't quite been able to figure out why.
Yeah.
What should they be looking for in terms of finding out more, starting, because an enabled and informed population is a huge thing.
Yeah.
But they don't need to qualify as legal experts.
No, well, I don't. Yeah, sorry, you finish.
What should they be looking at? Looking at legal cases through a different lens. Should they be reading the news differently from a legal sense?
I don't know. I'm thinking that question is really kind of, how do we fix this, and what should you do to fix it? And one of the things that falls off people's lips very easily, indeed too easily, has just fallen from your lips, which is that we should all be more informed. Now, of course, we should all be more informed, but we can't all be more informed about everything. And some of us want to play video games anyway, and that's okay. So if we believe, but there's still that thought that we need normies, we need people who are not professionals in this field. We do want some who know more and care more and so on. And so my view is that if we want to solve the problem, well, the jury gives us the way to think about that, because the jury says we don't have to inform the whole of Ireland about all the facts of this case, a murder case, a robbery case, a libel case. We need to get some people who we can credibly say stand for the people of Ireland or Australia. And if we get a strong consensus from them, we know it's not an accident. We know that that's what ordinary folk think. And so I think we have to develop that basic idea, and we also have to skill it up, for which watch subsequent videos, particularly part 2, listener. But we're not going to get, but the other way we have used to scale our normality, to scale a solution, is elections, and they don't work very well because we don't have much time. And so it's easy to manipulate us. And if everyone's trying to manipulate us, if we're halfway decent, we hate them all. And that's roughly where we are now. So it is important to put it back in people's hands, but not back in the hands of the mob, back in the hands of institutions that we have trust in, and for good reason. And the jury is one such institution, and we can vary that somewhat and build new institutions based on some of those core ideas.
Very good. Okay. I'm looking forward to the reveal for how to fix the judicial system in forthcoming videos.
But for 10, now, it all gets very juicy by video 10.
But you have to put the work in first.
You have to put the work in. Thanks. But it was they sorted it all out in Venice in 1297. In fact, here's a teaser for you. The Doge of Venice, most people have heard of the Doge of Venice, an elected monarch. And the Doge of Venice, way back in 1297, had less power than King Charles has today. Pretty interesting. They've worked out the devolution of power, and they used some of these mechanisms that I'm talking about, and that's and you'll just have to stay tuned to find out.
I think people will be glad of any opportunity to take back the word Doge from where it's been debated over the last while. Indeed. Okay, looking forward to it.
Good. Thanks, Colm.